Turn the mics on so you're live. All set.
All right, no longer memorize. The hour being 6:12 PM on Monday, June 17th, 2024. I'd like to call to order the City of Laconia City Council budget meeting. Before we go any further, though, I'd ask Councilor Susi if he'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands,
One
one nation,
under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Susi. Thank you. Joined this evening by our recording secretary, Kitty Gargano. I'd ask her to please call the roll.
Counselor Susi,
Here.
Counselor Hoffman,
Present.
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
Counselor Bogert,
Here.
Counselor Felch,
Here.
Mayor Hosmer.
I am here. We're also joined this evening by Laconia City Manager Kirk Beati and Finance Director Glenn Smith. We are calling this meeting, or this meeting has been called as a general budget discussion, which I will turn over to all of you and the city manager here shortly. I have a previous commitment, and I will be leaving shortly. And I'll turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Mark Haynes to lead from here. I do not believe we'll be voting on the budget tonight. I believe the mayor votes on the budget anyway, but if I can just sort of kick this off and hopefully frame our budget discussion. I first joined the city council in 2018 as city council representing Ward 6. Since that time, we've had 6 budgets, and this will be the 7th budget that will be part of. All 6 of the previous budgets that I've been here for were unanimous votes. And I think that is a point of pride for me and should be a point of pride for the city. I think many of the people sitting around the council table over the years have had various political points of view, or registrations, or ideas. The nice thing, the great thing about being part of the council is that it is nonpartisan. That in years past, certainly, and I expect going forward as well, politics were pushed aside. One's party was irrelevant. Politics taking on in Concord or Washington or the county level were compartmentalized and certainly irrelevant to the work that was done here. You know, this council was a group of people who were focused on finding pragmatic solutions to problems. I think no further than my good friend who's passed away, Bob Hamill, and I sat next to him when I started my time on the council. And I would suspect Bob and I probably didn't share a whole lot of political commonality.
Yep.
But you know, I think the number of times we maybe disagreed on a vote, I could count on one hand all the time I sat with him. And I remember sitting next to Bob, and sometimes he'd be sighing or shaking his head, not really liking the way the discussion was going. But on more than one occasion, he'd shake his head and he'd say, you know, I may not like this, but it's probably the right thing to do for the people I represent. And I always respected that with Bob, and he'd cast a vote. And I learned a lot from him in doing that. You know, the budget discussion we're in the midst of right now, it's not just about numbers. It's not just trying to find the balance between income and expenditures. That is critically important. But really the budget that we vote on is what I think of as a value statement that comes from all of us sitting here. And when I say that, what I really mean is we as a group value certain things in this community, particularly public safety. I look no farther than Counselor Cheney and his constant, passionate advocacy for our police department. And I think that's really our number one job here as we serve public office. It's a value. We value public safety. We value the men and women that enforce the laws of the city and of the state. And when we cast a vote, whether it's a vote that has to do with their salaries or retention incentives or their budget going forward, we do so because it is a priority of ours. It's consistent with our values as a group. I think the same thing with our fire department. You know, 911, when we ring it up and something's gone wrong, it doesn't make any difference whether someone's poor or affluent, whether they're homed or they're homeless, whether they're on the street or at the beach or at the park. Those men and women come to help. And we value that. And we value it so much that we continuously and constantly invest in them as men and women, in their equipment. And that's why we have such a strong community and such a great city. I think our job right now is to look at this budget, and like a budget, whether it's the state budget or it's a city budget, budgets aren't perfect. They are our good faith attempts to find compromise, to lead with our values, to be judicious and wise with taxpayer money, to let our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, our DPW workers know they are valued and we're committed to them. Therefore, there may be some discussion going forward. In fact, I hope there is, because I think through good discussion about facts, about data, about policy and public policy, we come to something that is better for everybody. It may not be perfect with us, but we get closer to delivering what is really meaningful to the people that we represent. I'm particularly proud to serve with all of you, and I've learned from all of you in the past. And I hope, as this process moves forward, that we don't let perfect be the enemy of good, that we see through the trees and appreciate the forest and make good decisions. And we get to unanimity because we are all at heart people who are doing this because we want to serve our community. We want to be good, pragmatic problem solvers. And when all is said and done, we raise our hand and say, I'm in and I support this budget. I want to let Glenn Smith and Kirk and your team throughout the city know how much we all appreciate your work that's gone into building this budget, the variables that go into every budget, the puzzle pieces, the appreciation of the men and women that are your colleagues throughout the city, your requests from all of us about how to move numbers around and try and make it fit better. It's greatly appreciated from all of us, and thank you. So, as I said, I have to leave, Bruce, because I have a prior commitment this evening. Although if you want to offer a little feedback, you can do that to me. But
No, I just
wanna
want to
turn it over
offer an
to you.
apology to you and my fellow council members for being late.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. We talked a lot about you. We assigned you to 3 more committees. Okay? Yes, and you're our liaison to Berlin. You got to leave in the morning, okay? That's New Hampshire too. That's not Germany.
Okay.
But nonetheless, this is a tough process, but I trust us all to get it right because we are here and driven by what is particularly important, and that's the folks that we serve. So with that, Kirk, I'll kind of look to you to sort of kick things off here, and I'll make my way out momentarily.
Thank you. I'll steal one of your lines, and I want to thank Glenn, too, because I don't know how many times a day I go, hey, what if we throw this number in here? What does this do? And he does it, and so thank you to him and his group upstairs. He's tired of me, but that's okay. So this, if you recall, this meeting historically has been designed as a opportunity for you guys to bring department heads back in for, you know, re-questioning, reevaluation. Hey, I didn't understand something within your budget, whatever that might be. We haven't done that in a couple of years. Just we've always had an opportunity to do it, just never been needed. When I threw this out to you guys as a potential, do you want to see department heads again? The feedback I got from a few of you was, no, but we do need to have a little bit more conversation about the budget. Would this be a good time to do it? And I think it's an ideal time to do it. And it doesn't make us force it into a council meeting when we're trying to do 24 other things and be able to just have frank, open conversations about the budget. As you know, moving into this budget, I have a bunch of numbers and everything we can talk about and we will talk about. As you recall in this budget, we've come up with the number that we would do to be classically tax cap compliant, meaning the way it's been for the last 12 years. Within the budget process, within the tax cap, within the charter, it does state that it gives us an opportunity to exempt certain numbers from the budget to allow us a little bit of flexibility in the total amount to be raised by taxes following the preparation and passing of the budget. As we moved into this spring, it was made very clear by, I was going to say many, but all of our departments, that we really needed to do something about our recruitment and retention. And the retention, both recruitment and retention, was based on salaries. We needed to do something with the salaries, even though we were mid-contract year, and this was for our union and non-union members. As that was being formulated, we knew that as we were going to increase these wage scales, that it was going to affect how we funded our FY25 budget, the budget that you're working on preparing and passing right now. Exercising a portion, not the entire, but a portion of the exemptions allows us the opportunity to continue with our budget that we had in FY24 that were current, and what we would normally do to move it forward for FY25, while adding these wage scale adjustments to the budget. It was allowing us a little bit of the best of both worlds. Obviously, to do that, though, now we have to be in agreement that that is how we want to see the budget progress forward, and that's what we have to have these conversations about to get us to a point where, and I say us, because it is all of us, but certainly the six of you to make, to get to a place where you're comfortable in how we move this budget forward. I think you all have seen the instant results of the wage scale changes. Both, you've heard it enough from me and the department heads, but I know a bunch of you are hearing it from the rank and file within the city that these are changes that it's a little indescribable to them, and so it's really exciting. And I think we were fiscally responsible in how we did those. But again, just take another step back. Now we've got to make sure that we've got to make the determination on how we fund that in FY25, and that's why we're here tonight. We have numbers to present to you, certainly. We have answers, I hope, to all of your questions. I hope. If not, we certainly will work on them. But our goal is the guidance from you to how we want to move this forward, and we certainly can work on that. So that's why we're here tonight.
And up for discussion?
If you would like, I can.
Okay.
If it's okay with you, I will
Yeah.
continue to talk a little bit if
Sure.
you want. Okay. You have your copies. What's that? Oh, I was just gonna pass them down. Okay. So there's two documents here coming forward to you.
No.
If you want to pass those down.
Yep.
There's one for each of you there. I'll just kind of give you a little bit of an update on where we stand. Those two different documents. All right, so what you have, we'll use, the first one is the one titled Net Proposed Expenditures. So this is what we're looking for from, from taxes. We took out all of the other stuff that goes along with it. You'll see the city rate, the local school, so our SAU, what they have, our county, our state education, that statewide property education tax, comes up with a total of $59,464,000. That includes the $1.4 million in increases based on two sets of salary numbers. One is city side salaries, which was that increase in the wage scales for our employees. And the second half of it is $500,000 of that is to the SAU for, as you recall, they've chosen to use their retention bonuses or retention incentives in the FY25 budget, which is what we looked at here. If we were not to use any exemptions, you would note that our tax cap limit would have been $58.024 million. Just under 5% increase, 4.96% increase. Currently, what we're showing right now with the exemptions is at 7.5%.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, go ahead, Bob.
Is it-
If correct.
No,
is
yeah,
right-
no, that's fine.
Okay.
Contains 7.5% increase in spending over last year.
Correct, 7.57% above last year in spending. That is not in tax cap, tax rate, that is in budgetary
Actual
increase.
spending.
At money request, money from taxes increase.
Right.
If we were to hit that, I keep calling it the classical tax cap limit without using any exemptions, it would have been 4.96%, so 5% increase. So we're just over 2.5% above.
Back me up for a minute. If we did not use any of the exemptions.
Would be at 5%. We'll call it 5%.
But we're using the exemptions, so we actually raise our amount of spending?
Yes. Well, we raised the amount of requested from taxes.
Okay, but we're using the exemption part of, not the whole, the very small part of it.
Yeah, I think it's like
20
25%, 28% of it, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So that allows us to meet our obligations.
Correct. That allows us to meet our obligations with all the salary changes and all of our normal needed budgetary obligations.
Including 500,000 to the to SAU for
Correct.
teachers.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so the total amount that you're saying we are gonna raise is the 59 million.
If you were to pass it with the exemptions, that's what it would be. Correct. Last year, we were just over 55.2 million. And we did approve 1.2 million below what was allowed by the tax cap as a way to offset, as we saw our assessments being increased. It was this body's way of trying to lessen some of the burden upon the taxpayers last year. If you remember, we were 1.2 million above what we could have spent.
Okay, now,
Go ahead, Bob.
in regards to the state,
Mm-hmm.
on the state participation,
Mm-hmm.
this is all assumptions, because we don't know what the state will give us in the fiscal year 24-25, correct?
The revenue from the state, we're pretty confident now on where we stand.
Okay.
Yep, there's nothing really outstanding that we're waiting on now. We were waiting on one piece of legislation to finish up, but the way it's going to finish up, I'm comfortable that what we have for revenue coming in is steady.
Okay, and as far as the county, can you tell me what the county number was last year?
County last year was 3.8.
Okay. So there wasn't as big an impact as we saw previously?
No. And there was nowhere near the increase. I think we are 4.7% increase this year. Last year, we were over an 8% increase. So it was much more manageable this year.
Okay, now, if we did not use any of the exemptions, and so we would have $58 million we would raise by taxes.
Mhm.
And where would we would have to find a way to cut 1.4 million. Or
Correct.
we'd have to reduce,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So,
So, yeah,
But this also includes the extra 5% we did in retention salary.
Correct. This all includes the additional wage adjustments
Not the
that you
three.
guys have
Three
seen.
was in- on
The
it
3 was in
already.
there anyhow. This was, right, this was the additional on top of that. And you've seen them all with the exception of the non-union, which you'll see at your next meeting. And that's all in line with the exact same way that we've done all
Okay,
the
and they've
others.
all agreed. There's been,
Yeah, I think we're good. I'm working with one group right now, but I think we're good.
thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, quite right. Council Bogart.
Kurt, if we chose not to use that 3/5 vote exemption, and we have
2/3.
2/3?
Yep.
Okay, that's even more than what I thought. But anyway, thank you. We have $810,000 in cash that we received through the thing. That is just sitting there. It's not committed on the expenditure side, and it's not committed for anything. It's just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
So if we use that 810,000 towards the capital projects, then that would reduce that footprint of 1.4. And if we were to look at that 600,000, there's probably some adjustments that we can make or defer without having to touch any of the salaries or the salary base whatsoever, and our benefits, or reduce any of the headcount, or do anything like that, and just look at the operational side, we could probably squeak in within the tax cap without the exemption. Would that be a probability?
So, I think that after, I have looked into that, upon request. And I think one of the only thing I'll say is, certainly if we were gonna do something like that with one-time funds, we would wanna do it out of an area where we're spending one-time items as opposed to trying to sneak it into the budget somewhere where we're automatically gonna be behind next year trying to catch up,
The
i.e.
capital?
salaries.
The capital?
Capital is a lot easier, but I will throw out as my 2 cents, certainly decreasing the capital. Right now, if we just magically made 800,000 out of capital disappear, next year when we're building the budget, that will start us at a little bit lower base than we normally would be building off of. So if I was gonna add, say, 2% to the capital, it's 2% on $800,000 less. So it's just, it's numbers that, looking to see how it defers us in the future. That would be my concern.
So, may I?
Yes.
So as we speak towards, this budget kind of frameworks the future budgets.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Especially with the tax cap.
So, as we came to the border of the tax cap on an ongoing basis, and every time we bond something, we're either it's gonna push the tax cap top, or we're gonna have to vote again to exempt something. And if I had to look at that framework, the categories of stuff that we have available for us, one being the needs of the city, one being the wants, and then there's ones that are luxury. And the luxury items, I would have to say, here in the near future, I don't see any point in moving on any luxury item when we're already looking at pushing the envelope on the tax cap. Now, as we continue framework in the future, we know for a fact we're gonna need a new DPW building. There's no doubt about it. Now, we all have this habit of throwing, well, we can just bond stuff. And yes, we are at, I think it's 26% of our gap approved limit. We're only using 26%, so it makes it look like we have a lot of room to move around. But in fact, if you looked at the payoff on each of those bonds, it's pushing things on the expenditure side up, correct?
Correct.
So we're gonna constantly bond ourselves out of a problem to override ourselves out of the bonded problem and keep moving back and forth as a seesaw. Boom, 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 boom. Now, so the reason why I bring this up is, at the moment, we have some critical needs that are be coming up in the next couple of years. One of them is gonna be a DPW building that's probably somewhere between 15 and $20 million, not including land. The purchase. So that's gonna be a hell of a chunk taken out of our bond area, because obviously we're gonna have to bond something like that. So it's gonna take a big chunk. So the reason why I mention that is we have cash available that's non-committed to anything that we can use to help soften the blow on our capital. Use that like we would a ARPA fund to purchase stuff that we need on the capital side, because the needs don't change. We still need the stuff, and we need to find a way to pay for it, and then try to magically find a way to pay for it within the tax cap, if at all possible, humanly possible. And to spend something on luxury items that will take us adrift and take away from our borrowing power for needs, you know, I have to question that philosophy.
Counselor Hoffman.
I think my problem with that, I understand what you're saying, but I think if we take those one-time funds and use it to prop up this year's budget instead of lining things up, we're setting up next year's budget to be misaligned. Is that?
In the capital, it would be, yeah. It's easier it's easier to move it around in the capital than it would be if we were to spend, say, on these salary increases this year and take that money.
Correct.
It's
Spend it
easier,
on
but it
capital.
does, to answer both of your questions the same way, it does affect the misalignment a little bit. Because if we would have, we'll just pick one thing. If we would just take the 800,000, take it out of roads, next year, to get back to baseline, I'm increasing, I gotta put 800,000 just into there,
Right.
just to get back to baseline. So
Personally,
to answer both your questions.
I would rather utilize the exemption this year and not kick the can down the road and set up a situation where we are forced to deal with it next year.
But would we have to, because I don't see us not having to do it next year.
Well, we're gonna alter the tax base by taking this exception, so that will be the basis of what the tax cap applies to next year. So theoretically, borrowing some kind of emergency or something else, this whole salary issue will not affect next year's budget in the same way, because it'll already be the basis that the tax cap increase applies to.
Correct.
Right, but that's not, what I'm saying is if a capital expenditure,
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you were,
No,
yeah.
he's next. Bob
Oh,
Bob
okay.
has a
No.
comment. After you're all right.
That's fine.
Duke it out.
What I don't understand is offsetting capital expenditures. If we use the money to buy something that we would have bought on the capital and we just pay cash for it, I don't see how that offsets us next year because we just paid for it. Or is it because that capital would add to the bottom line and we are now pushing the bottom line to a different level, which then sets the bottom line for next year? Is
Well, I
that what
think-
we're saying?
I think you're you're also making the assumption that if we don't spend that $800,000 on the antique center, that we're not going to bond that.
You still got the same problem.
We don't
If
have-
you don't spend it on the antique center and you bond the antique center, you're still taking away it's a luxury that is being taken away from the needs. And the needs of at least 21 million for a new DPW building is gonna take the lion's share of the, that gap number that we have available. Because we're only used to bonding $2 or $3 million at a time. And I think once we bonded 15 million for the theater, and we have major, I've been talking, and forthcoming, we probably have almost $40 million worth of road work that needs to get done. $40 million. These are roads that are already redlined roads where they're just failing. They're past the point of just resurfacing because the road bed itself has failed. So we have that coming at us soon. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, but these are the ugliness that is coming at us. And that's going to be another large expenditure, or however we choose to divvy that up as a council.
If I may?
Sure.
Okay. Number one, I haven't seen the council vote anywhere on the $810,000 gonna be spent on the antique center yet. I don't think that's a foregone conclusion at all.
No, you voted for it.
We voted for it, but we're also waiting for all the reports from the
I
city
understand,
manager.
but you did vote for it. And as a technical matter, we're committed to that.
No, we're not
And
committed
I'm
to it yet.
opposed,
We're not committed to it yet.
nevertheless.
And as I explained to you, I voted yes, so that we could bring it back up for a redo under that. When you vote yes, you're allowed to do that under Robert's rules and bring it back for another vote. Number two, the salary increases are the big chunk of anything being really over that, okay? That's a one-time situation.
Yep.
Okay, it's not gonna continue. Now, next year, we're gonna face the same thing. We might, who in the world knows? With the way things are turning all over the place, who knows? I agree with you, but one thing I wanna say is I don't wanna keep kicking the can down the road. Okay, we did that too long with that monstrosity over there. And we're lucky, we might be able to bail out on that. We're lucky.
Counselor Chin,
I,
I'd like to say something. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
We've talked about percentages and caps and whatever, but about 90% of the people I know want to know dollars. And my understanding was this proposal brings us up about $1.
That is correct.
Last year, we.
Yeah, not to interrupt, but that is estimated with, obviously, the state has to do there now, but right now we're at $1,
Okay.
even.
And last year, we dropped $1. So essentially, this year, on average, we're where we were. I understand every word of what you're saying. I don't want to buy the antique center at the price that it's been offered. I think there are too many variables. We ought to find out what those variables are and then adjust the price based on that.
And
Much
we're
as
still
it pains
working.
me to have to admit this, Charlie's a close friend of mine.
Yeah.
But this is business.
Yep.
And I think we have to, if we need an electrician to say, you need $100,000 worth of new electrical
Yeah.
stuff, that has to factor in.
And we're working on all that. so.
I understand that. So I guess what I'm saying is, you guys voted to buy it with the 800,000. At the end of the day, if I have my way, we're not gonna be spending 800,000 on that building.
No, but we might be spending it on some of the repairs.
Well, or maybe we'll insist that that comes out of the
Right.
purchase price. So,
Or we determine that it costs too much no matter what.
And that may
Right.
happen too,
It
Steve.
goes,
But at the end of the day, for me, I think most of my constituents who are not low-income housing folks, the vast majority of them still want to know dollars.
Yep.
How many dollars is this going to cost me? And I think to accomplish everything we've talked about here for $1 is pretty impressive, to be perfectly honest with you.
Especially when you went down $1 last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Down $1 last year, up $1 this year, it's,
break even.
Well, I agree with you, Councilor Cheney, about the dollar, okay? But people's memories are very short, okay? The fact that it was down $1 last year doesn't mean diddly squat to them, okay? I've made a couple of comments, and I've been very vocal about, I've supported the wage increase. We had to take care of our employees. But I think we have to be stewards and say, okay, this is what we had to do. Now we've got to show that some restraint and bring it down. You know how, I think all of us know how people react to money, okay? If something's $19.99, that's a bargain. But if you said $20, I'm not buying that, okay? That's where I'm coming from, okay?
You've been talking to my wife again, haven't you?
Yeah, no, but that's true. I mean, that's just the way
yes,
people
yeah,
are.
I agree.
Okay? And I think, you know, and I don't want to be redundant, that, you know, I've supported the salaries. We needed to do that. But I think we need to take a step backwards and say, okay, what are our needs versus what our wants are? Okay? And I think Kurt and I had this conversation. What concerns me the most, if you look at the tax cap, what the tax cap allowed this year, our capital request far exceeded that. So this isn't something that's gonna just disappear and go away. Every year it's gonna get more and more and more. And I think all of us have some wants that we would like to see. We're not funding that this year because we can't afford it, okay? And, you know, that's kind of where I'm coming from, okay?
I do understand. I've told this story to hundreds of people, and I repeat it here only to make a point. I remember my dad coming home from a place called the Penn Drug Store in Stamford, Connecticut, and telling my mother, I'm never going back there. They want 10 cents a cup for a cup of coffee. Some beans and some hot water, 10 cents a cup. I wished I could have my dad for a day right now and take him to Starbucks and watch the reaction. I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I say to you, the cost of things just, what we're paying for taxes today, 50 years from now, people go, holy smokes, you gotta be kidding. I mean, it's the natural progression of things.
I was telling Kurt, I came across 1956 tax bill from the city of Laconia,
Oh, God.
$56.
Yep. Yeah.
may I?
Yes.
And I agree with you. Inflation eats up a lot of our things. But if one was to look in the real estate market as a leading example, it's been going up and going up. And if you look around the country, prices, because people have, between interest rates and the price, they have stopped buying. So now, you're starting to see decreases in the price in Charlotte, North Carolina and stuff. Not necessarily here yet, but in other large cities, you're starting to see prices come down. Why are prices coming down? Because people go, I'm not gonna buy it. And it's like with anything. You can feed inflation or you can starve inflation. If you starve inflation, it's gonna start to react and then those prices do come down. When some of these vendors and stuff realize that, well, you know, I think I've hit the limit on what I can charge because the taxpayer isn't doing. Look what happened in Belmont. They couldn't get their budget passed, so they're running on a default budget. They are now scrambling, trying to figure out how they're gonna do fireworks, how they're doing on Old Home Day, how they're doing things. Because the taxpayer themselves have reacted. The other thing that goes along with this, every time we raise our taxes, we have to look at, we have a large renter population. The owners of those apartments, when they get their tax bill, they're not gonna go, damn, I'm gonna eat this and let it sit. They're gonna pass that right along. And we have a lot of people that live on margin, that are right on the edge. And at some point in time, that extra $1, $5, $10 is not there. So we now create another problem. The ancillary effect is they can't afford to stay there now because the landlord had to raise the rent so he could pay for himself and his taxes. So it's a slippery slope. You can ask anybody that owns
I totally agree,
apartments.
Steve.
No, go ahead,
I
finish.
totally agree, but at the same time, a year ago, when we went down $1, did he reduce his rents? Probably not, okay? Because we're in an anomaly situation, I think, because of where we're located. We have a big disparity between the guy's a renter and all those expensive homes we have on the lakefront and the condos and the chicken coops, I call them up there, the building of the weirs, all that kind of stuff, okay? You know, and people are buying, or like they bought the condos on Union Avenue across from McDonald's. You know, it's like, no, money's not the object. We're lucky in that way because our building assessments, our valuations have gone up enough that have helped absorb a lot of what you're doing here, okay? So we're lucky in that way, and then we're not lucky in the other way because the poor guy that is renting, okay, is getting kicked. And that's wrong. But we also have to give the services to the other side of the world. We're caught in a rock and a hard place. And as Councilor Cheney said, you know, down $1, up $1. I think that the city manager and his team has done a fantastic job in doing this. We're still within tax cap compliant. And we look at some of the other cities around the state, and I'm not saying that we should compare ourselves to them. Take Dover, Manchester, and those others. They blow their tax cap away every year, and you could care less. I think us as a group, I'm proud of this group, okay?
Oh, I am
really
too.
I disagree with everything else like that. I'm gonna ask the city manager to put on the next, city council thing, you know, reconsideration on that antique center until we see every single dollar amount. Cause I don't think, I'll be surprised if we come in halfway to that $800,000, okay? Because, you know, some of the professionals that you're talking to and getting those numbers. So I think what we've done here is really good. Is there a few things we'd all like to see? I was gonna ask him a question. Where's some of the money that was asked for to help the senior citizen kitchen center? Okay? I don't see it, it might, you know, but you know, we all have those certain things that we'd like to help out and everything else like that. And maybe there's other ways that we can, but this is tough. And the biggest one that bothers me here is that I know it's sacred and you're never supposed to say anything about it, is the school department. I think they could have helped us a little bit more in some ways.
We can still require it
City
because their
manager,
budget
One
has not
one
been
of the things
approved.
I'd just like to throw in,
Tony? would you like to say-
Go ahead and let him speak.
Go ahead, Carl.
oh, I was just gonna, I might as well add more things to the fire here. If in your, it's something that you haven't, a couple of you heard from me, a couple of you haven't, because I've just done this in the last couple of days. In the original document, you don't have to go look at it, but in the original document that's in front of you that I proposed, it was a 6.3% increase in the amount of, to be raised by taxes. We've got that lowered down to 7.57 right now. Increase in revenues, decrease in expenditures, that, you know, we've kind of moved around a lot of stuff. Something that is not in your book, but is in my worksheets that I've been working on, is the addition of an economic development director. It's something that we've talked about for a long time. My goal is to, is that a want that we could cut? Is that something that we want to move on with? I just want to make sure that that's out there.
My goal is to, once we get this funded, if it's this year, next year, whenever, is an economic development / housing director, somebody that can do a little bit of both. And hopefully grant fund a lot of it, but I can't sit here and guarantee that X amount of dollars is grant funded, but yes.
Yeah,
That is part of it for the cost. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that that's in my new numbers, not in the budget book as is, but I wanted it out there so everybody heard it and not surprised when we're doing something.
Counselor Felch.
Yeah, so I just want to say I'm definitely against using any one-time funds, because then you're just going to have to find them next year. I think this budget looks good. I don't really see any areas that we can make those cuts. You know, I hear people saying we need to come down, but where? Tell us where. Tell Kirk where, so he knows what to do. I think he's done a good job at getting it down to where it is. It could have been a lot more. As far as the schools, if the state would stop taking money from us, we'd be all set with the schools.
exactly.
So I'm okay with the budget the way it is.
Counselor Hoffman.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with Councilor Felch that I think the budget, I like where it's at as well. I also think about, like, this budget is a reaction to inflation as it trickles down through the economy. I don't think the city of Laconia's budget is a big enough stick to leverage the forces of inflation. I don't think cutting our budget in the name of not wanting to contribute to inflation is a realistic goal in my mind. I guess the other thing I'd like to say is I keep hearing from people that, the number one issue in this town is homelessness. And, I want to recognize how difficult of an issue that is, and that we are at least increasing how we address that in the budget. But I'd also like to point out that how we're addressing it is a reactionary position, because we're addressing it by addressing the need of our welfare department and how many people are coming in asking for help. I think this issue's not going away, and I think in future budgets, which I don't see that we have the room for it at the moment, but in future budgets, we need to find a way to deal with this issue in a proactive way. We need to find ways of dealing with this issue that are fair to the city and fair to the property owners, but are also fair to the taxpayer. We need to find real solutions to this problem, because there's going to be a limit to our tolerance and the city's tolerance to how big that welfare budget gets. And if we don't find proactive solutions, we're just going to watch that number go up.
Counselor Susie.
Number one, I'd like to offer my support to the city manager and the development director that has, I guess, a number of different responsibilities or requests, from looking for grants to grant writing to helping out the housing situations to selling the city. Okay, I think that's the number one.
That's exactly what the job description we wrote up sounds like right there.
is sell the city, okay, and do that kind of stuff. And to come back to the homeless, it's, as Council Hoffman, I agree with you, we're in a tough situation because I don't believe we can regulate what a building wants to do and charge and sell and rent control and all that kind of stuff. That's not, but we can support it through what, our finance department has done with the welfare budget and everything else like that, as much as we possibly can. But then to come back to what you were saying, Tony was saying, no, is that I wish there was a way we'd get the state to back off and taking this extra $5 million away from us. And we generate, and I'm still gonna say this, and Steve, excuse me, Councilor Bogart, you take this back, we generate, I think, a significant amount of rooms and meals tax out of this town, then we get nothing back in return from them in comparison, so, and I wish we would. And I hope someday they let us put a toll at the Weirs. Or something, you know what I'm saying, something to get some of that money back. 2%, wasn't there a bill, I think Mr. Representative Charlie there said that there was a bill sitting around give us 2% back, something like that, and I think, well, that'd be awesome.
You have to keep in perspective that at the legislature, and I think Steve will agree with me, there are 400 and some odd legislators in the House. The vast majority of them are in towns that don't generate a great deal of
Interest.
rooms and meals tax. But they got a vote, and they can take some of our rooms and meals tax to pay their discrepancies. So it's a lost cause.
I know, but we can keep trying.
But-
So, for example, if and when the state school ever gets sold or whatever happens there, I hope we get more than the 3 million you're talking about. We need a lot more. I know you're doing your best, and I appreciate what you've done there.
Counselor Hoffman.
Also point out that there was a bill this year that would have given us more tools to use as far as zoning and tax incentives in order to control the housing situation, and that bill did not pass. Things like that.
Yep.
Like you're saying, we can't tell people what to build, but through zoning and tax incentives, we can incentivize the buildings we want.
Well, we got burned because we gave a tax incentive on Elm Street, and it looks like now it's not being used for what I thought it was gonna be used for.
It was supposed to be used for apartments.
That,
and
that,
it's
but that all
condos.
goes back to what I've said 400 times here, and that is, put it in writing. You know, it has to be used for this, or you don't get the tax break. And I think that supports your argument largely, that zoning and those things should be set so that you can't pull those kinds of stunts. Sorry.
One of the comments I just wanted to make on the zoning and planning and any of those bills that come through, I know Representative Sinclair and I talked, Representative Bogart and I talked. If you have input on them, I'd love to hear them sometimes, you know, as you see them come up. I mean, I try to follow them as much as I can. I try to make sure we don't lose local control. That's always in my mindset of, does the local lose control? And so when I'm asked, what do you think about it? That's the first piece I look at, just letting you know my mindset and how I think. Are we gonna lose control because Concord said this is what we're gonna do? So just throwing that out there, that's how I think when I answer questions.
I'm gonna, if,
Counselor Bogart.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No, that's fine.
One of the zoning things that everybody keeps looking at is parking. And they say, oh, we should only have one parking per unit and stuff like that. And I just want to remind everybody that last week on Dixon Street, we have a huge parking mess. And as I look to the neighboring streets and stuff, and I'm not trying to say no parking signs are the answer, because they're not the answer. They're not the total answer. But that's a symptom of the issue. When you, for everything we think we're doing great by requiring less parking, it's still not gonna make the cars go away. So the cars have to go somewhere. So they have to either gonna park in the street, park in your neighbor's yard, they're gonna park somewhere, because two people living in a one-bedroom apartment is gonna have two cars. So I think the current zoning in Laconia is 1.5. So for all practical purposes, a two-bedroom would generate at least 3 parking spaces, which is normal for the amount of people living in a two-bedroom apartment. 1.5 seems to be the sweet spot for us. Seems to work. Some places, there are no parking. I've had this discussion on the zoning board where you don't have parking. You take over by the high school on Union Ave there. It's all street parking. They're going, well, I want to add another unit. Everybody's going, you ain't got no parking. Well, we have to live with that. And they got the extra unit in place, and we had to give the variance so that they could alleviate the parking. So my point there is, if we keep the local control, let the system work, it works, if we let it work. And with people who understand how to do the variances and stuff. It will work. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Mr. Mayor, unless, I don't want to step on your toes unless there's more to discuss. I think what I would like to do is, Glenn and I both have a little bit of more adjustment to make the, minor ups and downs with revenue and expenditure like we always do right up until the last minute. Put together the update, as it stands, which would be different than your budget book because of the conversations we've had over the last 2.5 months, just like I said we would. And unless there's any major objections, put forward to you guys, either at this coming meeting or the next meeting afterwards, I'm gonna try to do it sooner than later, a vote on the budget. But that's what I'm asking for direction.
So is that at the end of the month meeting you're talking about taking a vote? or-
I believe we'll be able to, unless I still have a lot of things to do. I think we could, worst case scenario would be the 8th I could have it ready for. So I think there's, if you'd rather.
You give us an outline this coming Monday?
Yeah, which I have the potential to do. If you want an extra 2 weeks to work through some stuff, think about it, look at our final numbers, we can plan on it for the 8th.
Can you highlight the stuff that's changed when you
Yes.
send it to us?
Yes.
That way we may be able to work on it next week instead of next
Well,
month.
there's a council meeting Monday night.
That's what I'm saying.
24th, yes.
If he outlines the changes so that that's all we have to really wrestle with.
Yeah, and it'll be open for your discussion that night anyhow,
yeah.
whether you vote on it or table it to the next meeting anyhow.
So,
Yes, go ahead. Council Vogel.
Mr. Mayor, are we moving the 8th to do the vote? I'm trying to get it concreted down so that
I hope we can do it next Monday night.
a vote on the budget?
Yes. Assuming he sends us an outline of the changes from this, highlighted, where it goes up or down. I hope four of us can vote for that.
Don't we have to have a public hearing first?
You already had your public hearing. You had your public hearing based on the budget that I proposed. In that time frame moving forward, you've made these discussions and so you've already had a public hearing.
So no public hearing for the exemption.
I don't believe you need one. I will confirm with it, but I don't believe you need it
Just wanted to
as a
make
public
sure
hearing,
about
but I
that. Yep.
will confirm that, but I don't believe you need one.
Okay.
Okay, so Monday night, we could have,
Potentially Monday night, potentially Monday night. Let's just leave it at that, so I'm not being confusing. Potentially Monday night in
okay.
front of you.
Because he's gonna print it in the paper.
Potentially Monday night. And potentially not, but no, potentially Monday night,
And can we get it down to 99 cents?
yes.
Well,
Okay, and please point out in the paper it's a
And we do have, like I said, we do have some more, some minor adjustments here and there that will not go up. Let's just leave it at that. It won't go up anymore.
yeah, but I think we have to be clear. It's not gonna make a major difference.
No, it won't be significant difference, but it will decrease a little bit, not significant.
Get a penny.
99 cents.
Give more.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else they wanted to add?
And you guys certainly would have your discussion on when it, in front
Right,
of you
we-
anyhow, for vote yes, vote no, table, so you would have opportunities.
Well, I can't speak for, well, I'm gonna speak for him. I think the mayor made it very clear that he would like to have, a six of us in favor. I have to be honest with you. I didn't hear anybody, no one has any areas of concern or anything that they wanna discuss or
I-
cut or talk about or,
I think the only thing, and if I may,
no, go ahead.
the city manager, one thing I missed, when the department heads came up, maybe police did, and I think Glenn did. None of the departments really came up and wanted to talk about the library did. Talk about the actual figures, go down the lines of the budget, okay? It was more like I said this earlier, how great thou art, okay? But, I understand, and I've said this before, I look at this body, you to be the CEO of the city, and we're like a board of directors. And our responsibility is to question maybe, help guide, or voice our opinion, okay? But we put our faith in you to drive this operation, to drive this company, okay? That's how I sit with my own board.
Yep.
Okay? And all the faith in what you do. I just think sometimes the department heads and some of the lines, because we might have had questions, Steve might have, anybody have, on some of the items in the budget, okay? And I think that would be an improvement.
And that's fine, I certainly don't mind making sure that that's a point of emphasis next year. I'll say two things. One is, I think we historically, back when I was a department head and before that, we got so bogged down with numbers that it I think affected a good budget presentation, so I always talk about that, so maybe some of that's mine. The other piece, the one piece of advice I was told, when I became fire chief, and it came from Counselor Hamel, was don't tell us all the negatives. Please put positives in there.
Positives, right.
So those two things you brought up, I will take credit for maybe a little guidance on my department heads like that. But I get your point where you're going with that.
And then, you know, what Councilor Cheney said earlier, I think is very important, though. What Councilor Haynes said is reality. We went down $1 last year, we're going up $1 this year. They'll only forget the dollar we're going up this year. Les, can you help us with that, please?
The only thing I would add that Bob mentioned is that, I think one of the things that bothered me the most that in the budget presentations, the library was fine. She talked about creative new projects, that type of stuff. The police department, with the grants they've gotten, the taxpayer couldn't afford what the police department's done. Okay.
They've done an
But
amazing
I didn't
job.
hear anything creative. I didn't hear anything, you know, and there was just some things that came out that I just said, really? You know, I'll give you a perfect example, and I'm not picking on them, okay? Lakes Region Mutual Aid. Well, you know, it's only gone up 25,000, and I'm using this hypothetically. I didn't, but you know, well, we have a different call situation now in the whole. Good for you. I mean, you know, Laconia's going to have more calls than Center Harbor is. Okay, I understand that. It was just, you know, it's just like, oh well, we'll pass it on to you, and everything's fine.
Exactly.
Oh, the good old boys will take care of it. I'm not.
Yeah,
Not there.
and I think you and I had that conversation, that, you know, you're kind of stuck in that,
Yeah.
we have one vote out of 35 and you're kind of stuck with him, but understand that it's almost like one of those unfunded mandates that the change is happening and you sign the check or don't, you know, I understood.
Council Phelps.
Yeah, so one thing I've been doing ever since I became a city councilor, Kirk can verify that because I did it with him my first year as the city councilor, is when I get this, whether it's before their presentation or after, I personally sit down with them one-on-one. I give any department head that I have any questions about a call and say, hey, when do you have time to sit down? I did it with Kirk, I've done it with a bunch of our department heads, police chief, Parks and Rec. Whenever I have any questions or any ideas for them, because they're looking for ideas as well, I'll sit down with them personally, one-on-one. It's so much easier than the whole presentation, trying to ask questions then. And I've been doing that right along since I became a city councilor, so.
They've all complained about you, too.
Well, yeah, that's all right.
I think that's a good idea, because, I mean, if we're gonna go line by line through the budget, which we all probably should be doing, but if we're gonna do that at these meetings, we're not gonna get two departments in an hour.
Right.
I trust him to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
And he
I
does.
understand. I'm
And
using
we
my-
do, and we do, yeah.
Right, and I'm using my business side of the world because in business, same thing, okay? I mean, you see it, we can't go to every one of our departments, so we have a finance director, a CEO that does that.
Every line is scrutinized, and every line is justified, and sometimes it works for them, and sometimes it doesn't.
Council Borger.
At the county level, when we review the budget, we do it outside of council meetings as a meeting on its own, and we do go line by line, and each department head justifies each of the lines. And as we did this year, we took all of the, I'm gonna call it the personnel section of each of the budgets, and they were, it is what it is, because we had to pay up the pay rates there at the county level and stuff. So that was kind of like untouched once we got the right numbers there and put it on the correct guide path. And all the operational numbers, line by line, were then justified and adjusted right there on the spot as we were talking. The county administrator, they had the computer up, and as the numbers were being discussed, if it went up, they changed the number on the line item. If it went down, they changed the number on the line item. And by the time we finished the budget reviews, you had a number that then was presented to the delegation as a whole through a presentation from the budget committee, and then that was voted on by the delegation. So that it took the, and you're correct, it took like 2 hours per department head to go through each of them. The nursing home took a little longer because that's in itself a huge budget. But it seemed to work, and being able to do something like that, as long as one person was asking, being the conductor of the meeting, and just kept it moving and stuff. So it's not a bad idea.
Well, you get paid the big bucks though, so.
Yeah, he's with the county.
Where?
At the
We got
state.
you with, oh, at the state.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Need to run for the legislature then.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a personal comment. I suggested to the young pressman over here that we blame the city manager for any increases in the budget. But having thought about it, the mayor's not here.
Yep,
Yep,
I'm with
got
you.
it. All in favor?
You get that?
It's all the mayor's fault.
Yep.
We would have cut it in half,
Well,
but
he had an easy week this
Yep.
week, so we'll blame him for next week. Is anyone else?
no, thank
Anything
you.
else?
Have a good night.
My apologies to all of you for not showing up on time. I don't know why I thought the question was, do you have any questions? If you don't, then we won't have a meeting.
I think you just need your naps, that's fine.
Yes. That too.
Not a problem.
Okay, is there any other business? Seeing none? Madam Clerk, we are adjourned at 7:20.
You going home or you going over there?
I'm going over